In the glare of an ancient dawn, survivors of the flood stand upon the sun-blasted plain of Shinar. They speak as one in the old tongue, because all the world's people are yet one. A murmur spreads through the crowd. "Let us build a city and a tower with its top in the sky," someone says. Wheels turn as camel trains bring clay and fire from distant ovens. Slaves carry bitumen from the muddy pits to mix mortar. The rhythmic clack of hammers on chisels rises like a prayer of creation. Slick with bitumen and sun-baked clay, each brick seems to hunger upward, a promise reaching for a future where this city might touch the sky. The air hums with the scent of wet earth and smoldering kilns. Dust swirling around bare feet as laborers hoist baskets of sun-hardened blocks, their chants blending into a unified rhythm that echoes across the vast arid expanse. Families gather at the base, sharing loaves of barley bread and dates plucked from sparse groves, their faces lit by the hope of permanence in a world reborn from waters. This is not mere construction, it is defiance against oblivion, a collective act of will to etch humanity's mark on the heavens. In this primeval scene, no single voice dominates, just a chorus of defiance and ambition. A restless energy pulses in the people's eyes, a hunger to claim power in stone and sweat. Nimrod stands in silhouette against the rising sun, a mighty hunter and rebellious king, his cloak flapping, his fist clenched. Legend will say he commanded the work, declaring, "I will make us a name that resounds to heaven." The ancient narrative itself does not name the tower's human architect, but centuries of retelling insist that he stands at the crane, demanding bricks be piled toward the sky, his voice cutting through the clamor like a bronze blade. Perhaps he paces the scaffolding, urging workers onward with tales of conquests in the wilds, his presence a spark that ignites the collective fire. Around him, artisans etch preliminary designs into the dust, spiraling ramps and tiered platforms, envisioning a structure that mirrors the stepped mountains of their ancestral lands, a bridge between Earth and the divine realm where stars wheel eternally. High above the tower's skeleton, the sky is tranquil, but on this day, quiet becomes uneasy. A desert breeze whips the scaffolds, and beyond mortal sight the heavens seem to shudder. A voice like thunder or a whisper in the minds of prophets goes out, "Behold, the people are one, and they have all one language. Now nothing they imagine will be impossible for them." The workers pause mid-lift, sweat beading on their brows as alien sounds burst around them. A man yells, and nobody comprehends. Shouts become accusations, confusion slips into panic. The tower trembles, as if fearing its own undoing. Tools clatter to the ground, and the once cohesive crew fragments into clusters of bewildered faces, hands gesturing futilely in the growing babel of tongues. What was a symphony of purpose dissolves into discord. The ambitious ascent halted not by siege or storm, but by the unraveling of communication itself, a divine intervention that scatters words like seeds on the wind. Laborers clutch one another as the unified chorus falls into dissonance. The proud city is abandoned halfway to heaven. The incomplete spire juts from the plain like a broken promise. Once these bricks were bound by collective will, but now they taste only confusion and fear. Smoke curls from the dying kilns, a ghost of the ambition that fueled them. Suddenly, a new name arises. Babel, meaning confusion, for the Lord has muddled human speech. Wordless and frightened, the multitude scatters in all directions, carrying shards of many languages to distant lands. Families pack meager belongings onto carts, their eyes wide with the shock of isolation, as groups splinter along newly incomprehensible lines. One band heading toward the river valleys, another trekking into the hills, each carrying fragments of the old tongue that will evolve into dialects across continents. The plain, once alive with unity, falls silent, save for the wind whistling through unfinished arches, a haunting reminder of how swiftly harmony can fracture. In the twilight of that day, the narrator of the ancient account gives the land its name, Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them across the face of the earth. Civilization, once unified, dissolves into many tribes and tongues. In silence, the desert wind carries the seeds of myth across the world. Ages later, among scholars and storytellers, a question emerges, in the ruins of truth and fable, who truly built the tower? This query lingers like the echo of unfinished chants, inviting generations to sift through layers of legend and lore, seeking the builders not just in stone, but in the very essence of human striving. Centuries pass. On the very plain of Shinar, the world has forgotten that first sunrise. Now a team of archaeologists at the ruins of Babylon sifts through the dirt. One of them brushes dust from a sun-baked mud brick fragment. On its surface, ancient cuneiform letters bleed across the clay. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. The fragment hints at something vast. Under layers of earth, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, lie foundations of massive temple towers. The sun flares as the archaeologist squints at broad staircases and buttressed walls, still standing like age-worn steps to heaven. To him they are echoes of a dream that once was, physical remnants of a culture where architecture served as both worship and worldview, linking the mundane to the celestial in a landscape of relentless sun and fertile silt. The dig site buzzes with activity. Assistants catalogue shards under canvas tents, their notebooks filling with sketches of eroded ramps and fallen cornices, while the faint scent of turned soil mingles with the distant call of migratory birds. They call this ziggurat Etemenanki, house of the foundation of heaven and earth, in the tongue of its builders. 7 terraces climb one atop the other, each a daring step toward the firmament. The base measures 91 meters on each side, just as a Babylonian tablet painstakingly records. In its time it soared high above the city, crowned with a temple of lapis lazuli tiles, a throne for the god Marduk. The archaeologist imagines priests in dazzling robes ascending it on holy days, the tower shining sapphire under the sun, its glazed bricks catching the light like fragments of the sky itself. Rituals unfolded here at dawn and dusk, offerings of incense and slaughtered lambs wafting upward, chants invoking Marduk's favor for bountiful harvests and victorious wars. The word ziggurat itself means raising high, but these ruins lie flattened now, as if the sky has folded in on itself. Yet even in decay, the structure whispers of its purpose. A cosmic axis where earth met heaven, a testament to Mesopotamian ingenuity that harnessed mud and fire to defy gravity and time. And what of Babel? Another tower stands nearby, the ziggurat of Borsippa, still over 50 meters tall. Locals call it Birs Nimrud, Nimrod's tower, for later generations associated it with Babylon's ancient glory. Yet this was a house of the 7 tablets, built for Nabu, the wise son of Marduk. From it, one once could see Etemenanki in the distance, as if they were twin ambitions. Pilgrims in later times must have gazed at its glazed bricks and whispered, "Is this the Tower of Legend?" But archaeologists distinguish them. Each ziggurat has its own story of gods and men, even if their shapes mingle in the memory of travelers. Borsippa's terraces, though weathered, retain traces of blue and gold tiles, evoking festivals where scribes, devotees of Nabu, god of writing, inscribed prophecies on clay under starlit skies. These structures were not isolated monuments, but hubs of community life. Markets at their bases traded spices from the east and wool from the highlands, while astronomers atop the heights charted the movements of planets, blending religion, science, and daily commerce in a harmonious ascent. In a nearby tent, the archaeologist lays out cuneiform tablets. The earth among Babylon's ruins offers no building blocks carved, Tower of Babel. Instead, there are laws, contracts, hymns, the day-to-day life of empire. Yet in language itself he sees a clue. The ancient Hebrew account uses a wordplay, Babel resembles Balal, to mix or confuse. Babylon in Akkadian was Bab-Ili, gate of God. Perhaps the storytellers at some point heard both meanings echo. The mix of words in 2 languages might have inspired the legend. A pun in the land of many tongues, and a name that carried a warning down the ages. This linguistic interplay hints at cultural exchange. Hebrew exiles in Babylon, surrounded by Akkadian scribes, might have woven local etymologies into their sacred texts, transforming a gate to the divine into a symbol of human overreach and divine correction. He also recalls the historians. The Hebrew narrative itself simply narrates the event, but names no person in charge. Only later traditions fill that gap. Ancient Jewish historians portray Nimrod as a fierce tyrant who led men away from the divine, his ambition a rebellion against the natural order. Medieval interpreters imagine Nimrod shooting arrows into the sky to challenge the heavens. The arrows fell bloodied, a grim omen to halt construction, symbolizing the futility of defying cosmic boundaries. Traditions in other faiths reshape the tale. In one account from Egypt, a powerful ruler commands his advisor to erect a tower of clay to confront the divine authority of ancient prophets. Each version has its own antagonist, Nimrod or that ruler. But the lesson endures. Hubris invites downfall, a timeless caution etched into folklore across cultures. These embellishments add layers to the myth, portraying the tower not just as stone but as a mirror for human flaws. Pride, unity turned to division, the quest for immortality through architecture. Meanwhile, the voices of ancient Mesopotamia murmur from clay. None say Tower of Babel outright, but some have shades of its tale. In a Sumerian epic, King Enmerkar of Uruk demands tribute to build a great ziggurat, pleading for all lands to speak one tongue. When that dream falters, the gods tinker with tongues, confounding his voice. It is an ancestor of the Babel story, a mythic seed of confusion long before the Hebrew telling, suggesting that the motif of linguistic division as divine intervention predates any single tradition. These echoes indicate that the idea of a single language shattered by the gods was woven into the region's lore, perhaps carried forward into the Hebrew imagination during periods of exile and cultural mingling. Similar threads appear in other ancient narratives, tales of gods fragmenting speech to prevent overreach, reflecting a widespread human intuition about the fragility of unity in the face of ambition. Beyond those scripts, royal inscriptions glint with similar themes. An Assyrian king boasts that his gods confounded the plans of the enemy and scattered them to the winds. Another records how Babylon itself fell because its patron deity abandoned it in anger at arrogance. Such images, scattered armies, foiled projects, ring like the tower story's moral: pride leads to ruin. The archaeologist wears these as a cloak. The Tower of Babel narrative may have drawn on a shared understanding that the proud are humbled by cosmic forces, a recurring motif in Mesopotamian literature, where kings' grand visions often end in lamentations over unfinished monuments. These inscriptions, etched on durable stone cylinders, reveal a worldview where divine favor, or withdrawal, dictated success, turning ziggurats from symbols of triumph to cautionary relics. The grand narrative of Etemenanki itself is multi-layered. Babylonian kings never bragged of opposing gods. On the contrary, they saw these towers as sacred duty. Nabopolassar and his son Nebuchadnezzar restored the ziggurat after it lay in ruins from decades of war. A stone cylinder has Nebuchadnezzar declaring he stretched its head to the heavens, pouring the empire's riches into it, mobilizing thousands of laborers in a display of piety and power that reinforced the king's divine mandate. Yet history is honest about time. Ancient scribes noted that the tower was overthrown by neglect and conquest, and a later conqueror, in his ambition to rebuild, only managed to shift some bricks before his own untimely end. Even traveling observers from distant lands described its glorious ascent: 8 tiers with a spiral ramp, a stairway turned round like a coil, carrying priests upward in processions that blended ritual and spectacle. Each layer of history is another brick in the mystery. Towers built, toppled, and reborn in turn, embodying the cyclical nature of Mesopotamian civilization, where destruction paved the way for renewal. If the biblical writers were exiles after the fall of Jerusalem, they must have seen these ruins firsthand. Perhaps the Torah's editors, writing in a foreign land, looked at the skeleton of Etemenanki and wove its outline into myth, a moral tale cast in stone and ruin, transforming Babylonian grandeur into a parable of humility. Modern scholars see the Babel account as an etiological myth, an origin story of languages, set against a backdrop they knew well. Yet the story's power is in its mystery, transcending its historical roots to speak to universal themes of division and aspiration. Parallels emerge in global folklore. Tales from the Americas of creators scattering tongues to humble the proud, or Asian legends of unified speech broken by celestial decree, suggesting that the Babel motif taps into a deep human archetype, the tension between collective potential and the isolating force of diversity. Now the camera of the mind pans out, over the ruined plain of Babel to the multitude of languages each human speaks, our narrator ponders meaning. Did a higher power punish pride by scattering people? Or was it destiny that tongues multiplied as people spread? Theology still debates the motive. Some say Babel was a lesson in humility, a divine check on human empire building, reminding us that true unity lies not in domination, but in reverence. Others say it's a mythical explanation of the obvious. People did migrate and diversify, and so languages grew like branches from a common root. Both the tower and its people fade from legend, but a bigger story remains: the formation of nations, the birth of civilization, the price of power. This narrative arc mirrors the human journey, from primordial oneness to fractured multiplicity, where diversity becomes both curse and gift, fostering innovation even as it sows misunderstanding. In quiet halls of the Academy, the debate continues: Babel as judgment or providence, literal tower or metaphor? There is no definitive answer, only interpretation. Historians note parallels in other cultures: tales of a messenger god scattering tongues, a Persian legend of confusion among builders, even indigenous traditions of languages mixed, hints that humanity everywhere senses a time when speech was one, then broke into many. But the biblical myth names the moment and places it on the world stage. It transforms pagan ziggurats into a cautionary tale for the believing soul. Babel became Bab-Ili, a gate to the gods turned into a stumbling stone of confusion, its legacy enduring in literature and art as a symbol of overreach. From Dante's visions of linguistic towers to modern novels exploring cultural clashes. As the sun sets on the horizon, the narrative voice lowers. Who built the Tower of Babel? Perhaps it was all of us, or no single person at all. It was 1,000 hands, and a singular dream, cut short by the dream's own undoing. Every temple tower of the ancient world was built by communities, priests and laborers, nobles and captives, all united by a belief in reaching skyward. Nimrod may have stirred the work, Nebuchadnezzar may have laid its bricks, and even that ruler from other traditions sent his advisor to build, but each was simply part of humanity's story. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia were not the achievement of mythic giants alone, but the legacy of real workers and real kings, their sweat mingling with the dust of ambition. The name carved on the stones is Babylon, not Babel, but through storytelling that became the same place, a fusion of history and holy writ that blurs the line between fact and fable. In this cinematic odyssey through myth, scripture, and the dust of empires, the question transforms. The tower was built by human ambition itself, a universal tale told by many voices. In the end, when the last voice is silent, the question loses its sharp edges. What remains is the lesson for every civilization: reach as high as you dare, but remember why you were ever called to humility. Babel's legacy lies not in stone, but in us, in the stories we tell, the tongues we speak, and the monuments we raise. The greatest tower stands not in Babylon, but in the human spirit, the endless desire to know, to connect, to touch the sky, even as our feet remain on the earth. This enduring quest, born in the plains of Shinar, echoes through every language and era, a reminder that our divisions, though painful, fuel the very creativity that builds worlds anew.